How did this video come about? Where does it belong? My name is Joachim Wernicke. This video is my personal, private presentation. Brief introduction. Born in Berlin in World War II, survivor of a bomb attack on Berlin. Grew up in West Berlin, physicist, engineering PhD, university professor, military technician, air defense, light reconnaissance drones, non-party, German citizen living in Berlin. US nuclear bombs are still stored in Büchel in the Eifel region. 82% of Germans want to get rid of this risk. Opinion poll, April 2021. But the nuclear bombs are being modernized, and the federal government is buying new nuclear bombers from the United States. German pilots are supposed to drop the American bombs on targets in Europe. A war crime under international law, and a case for the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Hence, the petition, Nuclear Weapons Out of Germany. The Nuclear Weapons Prohibition Treaty has been in force since January 2021. 122 of the 193 states in the United Nations had adopted it in 2017. 86 have signed it so far, 55 have ratified it, including the EU members Austria, Ireland and Malta. This means that nuclear weapons, their manufacture, possession, transport and command post are no longer permitted there. 4 out of 5 Germans demand the contract to also apply in Germany. Opinion poll, April 2021. But at the express request of the US government, the federal government boycotts the treaty and did not even take part in the negotiations in the UN. So the petition, German signature under the ban on nuclear weapons. This signature is not only compelled by the majority will of the Germans, but above all by the zigzag policy of the US government. In 2019, President Donald Trump terminated the INF Treaty. This Cold War treaty has protected Europe from land-based intermediate-range missiles for over 3 decades. And now, from 2025, the USA will be stationing new, precise, medium-range missiles in Europe, with ranges deep into Russia. Latest hypersonic technology. And the Russians take countermeasures. Can you blame them for that? With the new missile program, the US government has opened the door for Russia to deploy such missiles again too. And this has already started in the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, once Königsberg, East Prussia. The federal defense minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer complained in the spring of 2021. Only a few hundred kilometers away from us, Russia has deployed modern rockets and cruise missiles that can reach Germany without much warning. Why are the Russians doing this? Quite simply, they fear a surprise nuclear attack against their bunkered command centers in Moscow, a so-called decapitation strike from the new US missiles, as there was the danger from 1984. At that time, the heads of state, Reagan, USA, and Gorbachev, Soviet Union, defused the nuclear missile trap that they had built in Central Europe. They signed the INF Treaty. Because of the curvature of the Earth, the US troops in Europe cannot be led directly from the USA, but they need straight-line radio contact to nearby command centers in Europe. Without such centers, the troops and their missiles are without command, that is, useless. These US headquarters are all in Germany. They are deep underground bunkers in Stuttgart, Wiesbaden, Ramstein und Spangdahlem. But just like the bunkers in Moscow, These US facilities are also susceptible to a decapitation strike. This requires precise nuclear hits because conventional bombs are too weak to crack the bunkers. However, a few so-called small nuclear yields are sufficient, as was once the case in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In an explosion on the ground, therefore with a massive radioactive cloud of debris, worse than after the air explosions over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This Russian attack has to happen suddenly and lightning fast, so that the US military leadership can no longer react. Every minute counts. Therefore, the missiles are not fired from the Russian heartland, but as close as possible to Germany, from Kaliningrad. Flight time 7 minutes for the approximately 1,000 kilometers. So, nuclear war in Germany, and only in Germany, from 2025. The small area of Kaliningrad is militarily a lost position, caught between the NATO states Poland and Lithuania, within the range of NATO cannons, so any counter-defense is pointless. But Kaliningrad is the best position for a surprising Russian first strike. NATO could not prevent that. Wouldn't the US president strike back against Russia? In Europe, he can no longer do that because his command system has been destroyed. And he will stay away from striking elsewhere because hundreds of Russian missiles are targeting the United States, and then probably on the highest alert. The Russian president can even call his American counterpart immediately after the attack on Germany. Very unfortunate computer error. Our alarm system was overstrained by the new US missiles. That may or may not be true. German-Russian relations will be severely disrupted. The Russians would have lost raw material customers for a while, but they would be permanently rid of the problem of American missiles on their doorstep, because which European country would be willing to host new US command centers? The US government claims that the new missiles do not carry nuclear warheads, but only conventional ones. But will the Russian government believe that? The warheads can be exchanged inconspicuously, conventional for nuclear ones. How would the Russian attack in Germany be experienced? As a guide, total destruction within 2 kilometers of the target point. The bomb ignites on the ground. The bright light outshines the picture. The crater becomes visible. The shockwave churned up the ground all around. The fireball rises and forms the characteristic mushroom cloud with the remains of the bomb and soil material that has become radioactive. This becomes even clearer when viewed from the ground. Fallout with fatal radiation dose up to around 50 kilometers in the direction of the wind. The number of dead and permanently severely injured victims in Germany runs in the hundreds of thousands. Part of the area of Germany will be depopulated and will no longer be habitable for centuries due to the nuclear explosions and the radioactive fallout. With a typical wind direction from east to northeast, however, the severe damage remains limited to Germany. The absurdity of this new crisis, that Russia is even allowed to station the missiles in Kaliningrad, was only made possible by US President Trump because he terminated the INF Treaty. Why he did this remains his secret. Unfortunately, one cannot ignore the fact that the driving force in the new crisis is the USA with its military alliance NATO. Amazing! 28 of the 30 NATO member states are in Europe. But the NATO commander-in-chief is always an American general. His employer is not NATO, but the US President. Legally, NATO is therefore a foreign legion of the US President. In June 2021, NATO announced news at its summit in Brussels. The main enemy is now officially Russia. In 1997, NATO and Russia had agreed on a joint basic act. NATO today sees itself no longer bound by it. The Russians offer that both sides should refrain from deploying intermediate-range missiles. NATO rejects that. Incomprehensible, because NATO chief Trump made these Russian missiles possible in the first place. His successor Joe Biden continues on the Trump line. So the new American missiles will be stationed in Europe. Period. The disaster scenario at the expense of Germany is possible from 2025. But it must not happen under any circumstances. The German government must prevent it. And it can prevent it. Firstly, sign the UN nuclear weapons ban. Secondly, close the US command bunkers in Germany in a controlled manner. And thirdly, agree with Russia no longer to aim missiles at Germany, also in a controlled manner. NATO stresses that it is militarily superior to Russia. No wonder, considering the combined military budget of the NATO countries is 15 times larger. Nonetheless, NATO is expressly preparing for warfare. But it does not say where the war should take place. In terms of weapon technology, not a single European country, including Russia, is still capable of war today. Especially not Germany, with its centralized infrastructure, the extreme dependence on electricity, and without any shelter for the population. Not to mention nuclear power plants and large-scale chemical industry as bomb amplifiers. Therefore, the most important task of the German government, even more important than corona containment and climate measures, and therefore the petition, block war on German soil. To prevent anyone, opponent or allies, from detonating weapons of war against targets on German soil, for whatever reason. The German government can and must obtain the assurance under international law from its NATO allies. No bang on German soil. That is missing so far. As a raw material customer, Germany will be able to come to an amicable agreement with Russia as soon as the threat from Germany has been diffused as it is felt in Moscow. The US military targets in Germany have been dismantled, so remove the missiles from Kaliningrad. However, several serious breaches of word by the West against Russia since 1990 unfortunately are historically documented. With these experiences, the Moscow government will probably not get involved in anything before Germany has not only signed the nuclear weapons ban but also ratified it, effective under international law. That needs a tight schedule, because otherwise the new US missiles could appear beforehand. Not good for Germany. The issue of the risk of war does not appear in the election campaign of most of the Bundestag parties. CDU, CSU, SPD, FDP and AfD are on the NATO line. No discussions. The Greens claim to be in favor of withdrawing nuclear weapons and signing the UN Prohibition Treaty on St. Never's Day, also on the NATO line. Nevertheless, the only hope of preventing war lies in the red-red-green coalition, SPD, Greens, Left, because the Left is the only party demanding for years, without ifs and buts, withdrawal of the nuclear weapons and signing the UN Prohibition Treaty immediately. Red-red-green can only be achieved, however, if the left collects enough votes, significantly more than the only around 7% that the current polls predict. You don't have to love Die Linke, but with 3 times as many votes, it would be the catalyst for stopping the threat of war. Unfortunately, there is no other catalyst in sight. Hence, the petition to fellow citizens. This time, perhaps as an exception, second vote for the left. In the next election in 2025, differently again, because the nuclear hazard should be history by then. Austria was one of the first states to ratify the UN ban on nuclear weapons. Would the Austrians or Swiss ever tolerate command centers for nuclear fighting cocks on their soil? Are we dumber?